On the 7th of April 1945, a force of Japanese ships came under attack by U.S. carrier-based aircraft, which resulted in the sinking of history's largest battleship, Yamato. What most people overlook regarding Tengo is the fact that Yamato was not operating alone. It had the light cruiser Yahagi with it, which I've already covered in a previous video, link in the description below, and it also had 8 destroyers, which felt the full force of the carrier aircraft attack as well. On the 5th of April 1945, Combined Fleet Order 603 was officially given, which was the organization of the Tengo Force to commence an attack against Task Force 58 on the 8th of April. The organization included the 17th Destroyer Divisions Isokaze, Yukikaze, and Hamikaze, the 21st Destroyer Divisions Asashimo and Hatsushimo, and the 41st Destroyer Divisions Fuyutsuki and Suzutsuki. At 15:20 on the 6th of April 1945, the Tengo Force departed Tokuyama through the Bungo Strait at a steady speed of 20 knots. By the evening, the force was exiting the Bungo Strait, and due to reports of U.S. submarines in the area, the crews on all of the ships were in a state of battle readiness. Speed was also increased to 22 knots, and the ships began zigzagging on a southerly course. By 6:30 a.m. on the 7th of April, 14 A-6M fighter planes were overtop the Tengo Force, and by 8:40 a.m., a few F-6F Hellcat fighters spotted the Japanese, but the Zeros did not spot the Hellcats. At roughly 9:30, the Zeros had to return to Kyushu, and the Tengo Force no longer had air cover. At 10 a.m., the first radar contact with U.S. aircraft was made, and the ships were all prepared for action, with watertight doors being sealed, along with hatches and ventilators. At 10:14, the Japanese ships observed 2 Martin Mariner flying boats, but they were too far to engage with anti-aircraft fire. At 11:07, the Type 13 air search radar aboard Yamato made contact with a large formation of aircraft at 63 miles distance. As a result, the Tengo Force increased their speed to 25 knots. The first attack wave began their runs at 12:32, and the first ship they began attacking was Asashimo. Asashimo had been having engine issues throughout the morning, probably related to poor maintenance, and as a result, it had fallen behind the main force and was effectively sitting out in the open by itself. At 12:45, Asashimo was attacked by bombers from the USS Bunker Hill, which scored either 1 or 2 1,000-pound bomb hits. These hits were concentrated amidships, which further crippled the machinery spaces and resulted in the vessel coming to a near stop. The nearly immobilized ship was concentrated by torpedo bombers, which scored 2 torpedo hits on the starboard side. As a result, the ship capsized to starboard, and by 13:10, it had sank stern first, taking its full complement of 326 men with it. At the same time, Hamikaze also came under attack. Hamikaze opened fire at 12:41, and a couple of minutes later it was strafed on the port quarter by a couple of F-6F fighter planes. At 12:45, a few torpedo planes made an attack run on the destroyer, but it successfully evaded all of the torpedoes. Unfortunately, at 12:46, a 1,000-pound bomb struck the afterdeck, blowing off the fantail, which resulted in both propellers being destroyed along with the rudder, so the ship lost maneuverability and went dead in the water, and the aftermost 12.7 centimeter main battery mount got jammed in its position. With the ship being immobilized at 12:48, another torpedo bomber made an attack run and landed a single hit amidships in the vicinity of Funnel 2. Hamikaze broke in half and sank within a couple of minutes, taking with it 100 of its crew. 257 men were saved. Up next is the Suzutsuki, which remained undamaged for the first couple of hours of the attack. Its luck would run out at 13:08 when it was struck by a 1,000-pound bomb on the starboard side next to the forward 10-centimeter main battery turrets. Ready-use 10-centimeter shells in the upper barbettes of the turrets detonated as a result of the bomb impact, and a large portion of the starboard bow was ripped out of the ship. Remarkably, the ship's forward magazines did not detonate, and the crew was able to safely flood them to prevent them from detonating down the line. A large fire broke out, but this was eventually brought under control by the bow sagging deeper in the water and the fire control teams. By the end of the carnage, a total of 57 men were dead and 34 were injured, but the ship remained afloat. With the bow barely hanging on to the rest of the ship, it was forced to sail back to Japan in reverse, and it arrived at Sasebo at 14:30 on the 8th of April. It, like Asashimo, had been assumed missing in action, so its arrival in Sasebo was met with great delight. The ship was immediately dry docked, but on the 5th of May, the Japanese Navy cancelled all repairs on the ship, and it was captured by the United States after the war in an unrepaired state. Up next, we have the Kasumi, which is the most mysterious of the destroyers lost in the Tengo Force, not just because we don't know too much about its sinking, but the ship itself was not even photographed as far as I can tell. Kasumi took a total of 3 hits during the attack. 2 direct 1,000-pound bomb hits to the after end of the ship, and another near miss. As a result of these hits, the ship lost full control of its steering. Once the Tengo Force was no longer under attack, it was realized that Kasumi's steering could not be regained, and there was no method of getting the ship back to Japan. The Suzutsuki pulled alongside and removed the ship's survivors, and then scuttled it with 2 torpedoes at 16:57. The ship capsized and sank, taking a total of 17 crew with it. Up next, we have the Isokaze. Isokaze's story is intertwined with the Yahagi, as at 12:46, Yahagi was torpedoed, which resulted in its propulsion system going dead, and the ship lost all forward momentum. At 13:28, while the air attacks had eased on the ships, Isokaze attempted to pull alongside Yahagi in order to assist the stricken cruiser. As it was doing so, the air attack increased in intensity, and Isokaze had to pull away from Yahagi. At 13:56, Isokaze once again attempted to approach Yahagi, but was attacked by dive bombers in the process. No direct hits were scored, but a single 1,000-pound bomb exploded close enough to the ship's hull on the port side that it ruptured the hull plating around the port turbine room. At the same time, Yahagi was attacked by bombs and torpedoes, and as a result at 14:05, it capsized and sank. As for Isokaze, now that it was damaged and flooding, it was in no position to attempt any rescue efforts for the Yahagi's crew. As a result, with the remaining power, Isokaze withdrew to the north at 12 knots, but at 16:30, it lost power to its other turbine, and the steering gears also lost power. The ship went dead in the water. With no hope in getting the ship back to Japan, at 19:10, the order to abandon ship was given, and the destroyer Yukikaze pulled alongside to assist, removing 285 crew members. At 22:40, with the crew having been removed, Yukikaze opened fire with its 12.7 cm main battery guns, targeting the forward torpedo mount on Isokaze. Yukikaze's gunfire was accurate, striking the forward torpedo mount, which resulted in the torpedoes detonating, and Isokaze sank. In May of 2016, the wreck of Isokaze was discovered, and one photograph has been made public of its number 2 torpedo mount. Besides Yamato, Isokaze is the only shipwreck that has been discovered from the Tengo Force. Up next, we have the Fuyuzuki, which did not get hit during the attack. It was only strafed by machine gun fire and a couple of rockets, which resulted in 12 of its crew being killed and 12 being injured. The vessel acted as command ship for rescue operations following the attack, and it would scuttle the Kasumi. The ship would go on to survive the Second World War, and following the war, it, along with Suzutsuki, was used as a breakwater. Up next, we have the Yukikaze, which is also remembered as the luckiest destroyer in the Japanese Navy. Its luck held out during Tengo, as the ship was not hit by any bombs or torpedoes, but it was strafed by machine gun fire, which resulted in 3 of its crew being killed and 15 being wounded. It would go on to rescue Yamato survivors, and it would scuttle the Isokaze. The ship would survive the Second World War, but in July of 1947, it was handed over to the Chinese Navy, and it would eventually be scrapped in 1970. Finally, we have the Asashimo, which was not hit at all during the attack by bombs, torpedoes, machine gun fire, or rockets. It would go on to rescue survivors from Yamato, Yahagi, and Hamikaze, and it returned to Japan safely. On the 30th of July, 1945, it struck an airdropped mine, which resulted in the vessel grounding, and it became the last Japanese destroyer sunk during the Second World War. The wreck of Hamikaze was raised and scrapped in 1948 and 1949. Of the 8 destroyers used in the Tengo attack, 4 were sunk, 1 was permanently damaged, and 3 would survive the attack, though they would eventually go on to be sunk or scrapped. The Tengo operation cost the Japanese Navy just shy of 4,000 crew members. It was a disastrous loss for the Navy, which they had anticipated it would be from the very start. When times got desperate, the crews of these ships were placed between advancing U.S. forces and the defenseless Japanese mainland. This is one of those stories where some prices just weren't worth paying. With that having been said, that is all I have to say on this topic for today. So, if you have learned something new in this video, why not leave a like and a comment down below, and have a wonderful day.